Blade Runner was released in 1982 to a lukewarm reception. After being marketed as an action-adventure flick, audiences were surprised to find a moody and slow-burning movie with a complex and not entirely sympathetic protagonist. But since then, the movie has gained a cult following and has been the subject of pretty deep analysis. There's been a ton of speculation from fans about the religious symbolism of the film. Some of the religious imagery is pretty obvious, and some is subtle and understated. The movie begins with a shot over Los Angeles in 2019. It's a dismal industrial landscape with smokestacks belching fire into the air. As the shot progresses, we see the Tyrell Corporation's pyramid-like headquarters rising high above the city and away from the miserable ground level. Pyramids in the ancient world, such as Egypt's mausoleums, Mesopotamia's ziggurats, or the Aztec pyramids, usually were temples or had some other kind of religious significance. So this shot begins to set up a relationship between the Tyrell Corporation and the rest of the city. The company is in the realm of the divine, overlooking the city. The city, in all its misery, represents more of a purgatory or hell. Then, all of a sudden, an enormous eye fills the screen, reflecting the landscape for a couple of seconds. Pretty odd. There's been a lot of speculation over what this shot means, but many people agree that the shots of the eye combined with the shots of the Tyrell pyramids are a reference to the all-seeing eye, also known as the Eye of Providence. There's a lot of history behind this particular eye symbol, and it's been used by Christians, Freemasons, and the US government in various images. In Blade Runner, the combination of the eye and the pyramid is probably meant to convey the sense of the Tyrell Corporation as a kind of omniscient force on Earth, seeing and controlling everything that's going on. The eye is often depicted as floating above a pyramid, like on the United States $1 bill. So it's probably no coincidence that the shots of the giant eye and a giant pyramid go hand in hand in this eerie opening sequence. Soon after, we're introduced to the protagonist, Rick Deckard, and the filmmakers continue to create this heaven-hell relationship. Early in the scene, we see a neon snake, which may be meant to symbolize the serpent, or Satan, that tempted Adam and Eve in Genesis. That would further set up the LA street scene as a kind of hellish landscape. This scene also introduces the constant reign of dystopian LA, a permanent and rather unpleasant feature of the city that evokes some kind of hellish punishment for sinners. Soon after, we learn that the LA Police Department has coerced Deckard into working as a Blade Runner again, informing him that he must go after a few rogue replicants who have returned to Earth after escaping enslavement elsewhere in the solar system. One of these replicants is a guy by the name of Roy Batty. In an essay called Blade Runner, A Postmodernist View, John Paul Gossman writes, Roy was created by God and was separated by his maker when he was sent off-world, expelled from heaven. And like Lucifer, he sets about on a course of destruction. Deckard ends up going to the Tyrell Pyramid to meet Dr. Eldon Tyrell, the head of the corporation and the guy who created the replicants that Deckard is hunting.
Do you like our owl?
It's significant that there's an owl flying around the top of the pyramid. In Greek myth, the goddess Athena was often depicted with an owl. Because of this, the animal is used as a symbol of wisdom, a quality associated with Athena. This little symbol sends viewers a message that the Tyrell Corporation is an entity endowed with great knowledge, and that it has an almost godlike control over what's going on in the movie. The general feel of the Tyrell headquarters sends the same signal. It's full of warm colors, it's clean, it's not raining outside, and the architecture and interior design have a kind of temple-like quality to them, a total contrast with the shots of rainy LA streets. Compare the feeling of these shots with those we saw from the dirty, wet streets of the LA underworld that Deckard usually finds himself in. The two places occupy the same city, but they feel like entirely different worlds. This is where we finally get to meet Tyrell himself, the man behind the replicants. If Blade Runner is a religious allegory, then this guy is God. He is the creator of many of the film's major characters, the replicants, and he lives at the top of a giant pyramid. He has huge eyeglasses that magnify his eyes. And as a quick side note, the use of eyes as symbols in Blade Runner is a whole other topic, but one that deserves its own entire video. As the movie progresses, the symbolism surrounding the replicants continues to indicate that they are more akin to fallen angels than fallen humanity. At one point, Leon and Roy Batty, two of the replicants, visit an employee of the Tyrell Corporation to get some info out of him. Roy, the leader of the replicants, cuts a rather dramatic figure in his first shot of the film, reciting a line from William Blake's poem, America, a Prophecy.
Fiery the angels fell. Deep thunder rolled around their shores, burning with the fires of oak.
The original line in the poem is slightly different, though, as it reads, "Fiery the angels rose." Roy purposefully changes the line to fit he and his fellow replicants' situation. They fell to Earth in order to achieve their mission, to extend their own lifespans. In Blake's poem, the line refers to the character Orc, who represents revolution and rage, and opposes Urizen, a kind of tyrannical creator figure. Challenging religious authority and tyranny is a major theme of the poem, which fits nicely with an interpretation of Blade Runner that sees the replicants as a challenge to dominant establishment of the Tyrell Corporation. Having Roy say this line is one of the most interesting parts of the movie for me, because it tells the viewers that he's aware of the semi-religious implications of his quest to challenge Tyrell, his own maker. A lot of the other symbolism is just Ridley Scott, the director, putting little clues here and there, but in this case, Roy himself is acknowledging the fact that he's this kind of fallen angel, a Lucifer figure in the story. That's pretty interesting. A bit later, during one of the movie's most iconic scenes, Deckard pursues one of the replicants, Zora, ultimately shooting her and killing her. Many commenters have pointed out the fact that the gunshot wounds appear right where angel wings would attach to the replicant's back, which fits pretty nicely with the idea that the replicants are fallen angels. Zora's snake tattoo also reinforces that idea, seeing as it's a symbol of Satan, the most infamous fallen angel. After this happens, the movie enters its final phases and the religious stuff really ramps up. The two remaining replicants, Roy and Pris, meet a Tyrell employee, J.F. Sebastian, who plays chess with Eldon Tyrell. They convince Sebastian to help them gain access to Tyrell in his bedroom in the Tyrell Corporation headquarters. Sebastian takes him to the headquarters and the two ride the elevator to the upper reaches of the pyramid, literally and figuratively ascending so that Roy can meet his creator. If you've seen the movie, you know that Roy isn't able to figure out how to extend his lifespan. Tyrell tries to comfort him, talking about what a great replicant he is, and this adds to the theme of Roy as Lucifer, who was supposedly the most beautiful angel in heaven, but who fell to hell due to his pride and vanity.
You're the prodigal son. You're quite a prize.
I've done questionable things.
Also extraordinary things. Revel in your time.
Roy doesn't seem to appreciate Tyrell's words because he ends up killing him. He gives him a nice big kiss before that, though. I'm not sure what the symbolism is there, but it definitely is reminiscent of when Jesus kisses Judas just before he's crucified, outing him as a traitor. There's actually a ton of speculation as to who, if anybody, is supposed to embody Jesus in this story. Some people think it's Sebastian, and some even think it's Deckard, but most agree that towards the end of the film, Roy does a full 180 and transforms from an avatar of satanic evil into a full-on Christ figure. After going back to find that Pris has been killed, Roy goes on a sort of rampage and attempts to kill Deckard. During their confrontation, Roy appears to be in the final stages of his life. At one point, his hand seems to move involuntarily, and he whispers, "Not yet," to himself, willing his body to stay alive despite its programming. In order to stay alive, Roy pushes a nail through his own hand. It's not exactly clear how this helps keep him alive, but I always thought of it as a way to get his adrenaline pumping in order to stay conscious and alert. Of course, the other purpose the nail serves is in its role as what's probably the clearest religious symbol in the movie. By putting a nail through his own hand at the end of his life, Roy's similarity to Jesus becomes pretty much unquestionable. Roy continues chasing Deckard around buildings and rooftops until finally the chase concludes with Deckard clinging to a steel beam at the top of a building. Roy on an adjacent rooftop has somehow found and captured a dove, which he holds in his uninjured hand. This is pretty strange, especially given that Blade Runner is supposed to take place in a Los Angeles completely devoid of any kind of wildlife. It turns out that the dove, like the nail, also plays a religious or at least spiritual role. Roy completes his transformation into the Christ figure by saving Deckard from death, and thus forgiving him for having killed his 3 replicant friends. He chooses life over death for someone he has every reason to hate, despite having done many, as he put it, questionable things throughout his mission to extend his own lifespan. It kind of makes sense for him to make this decision, though. He has dedicated his purpose to finding a way to save his friends' lives as well as his own, but now that he knows that there's no way to do so, he sees no point in a senseless death for Deckard. It's a pretty remarkable character arc, and one made all the more interesting and meaningful by the religious parallels. Just as he is dying, Roy lets go of the dove that he's holding, and it takes flight into the sky. This is probably meant to symbolize Roy's soul or spirit ascending to heaven. Well, I'd say it hit the big symbols and religious themes of Blade Runner, but I'm sure I missed some details that others have caught. If you noticed anything I should have added, please mention it in the comments. And if you want to read more about religious themes in Blade Runner, I've linked to some of the articles I referenced in the video, as well as some that I didn't mention. There's one really interesting one that argues that Blade Runner is a big allegory for the Old Testament story of Jacob and Esau. So, hope you have enjoyed this video, and thanks for watching.